Imagine you are stuck in an endless traffic jam on the highway. All vehicles are stuck, so you cannot move forward or even change lanes. But think about the same situation, but now you are in a flying car. Then the 2D gridlock does not matter anymore. You can just fly up and avoid being stuck. By just adding one more direction, you have solved a problem that seemed impossible with a conventional car. And today we are discussing the hidden geometry of our reality, the higher dimensions. Hello, namaste, hola, guten tag, ni hao, bonjour, and hello in all the beautiful ways people greet around the world. Welcome to the fourth episode of Sleep of the Iceberg, and today we are going to talk about higher dimensions and how to visualize them. You might have come across terms like fourth dimensions or higher dimensions in movies, science fiction books, or even through people talking about scientific theories. So, what exactly are higher dimensions? We are all familiar with the three dimensions of space, the length, breadth, and height, which are basically used for defining the shape and size of our physical world. Everything from your coffee mug to a rocket launch into space can be measured using these three dimensions of space. But in physics and mathematics, the concept of dimensions beyond 3D is very prominent. Our universe is said to exist in at least four-dimensional continuum referred to as space-time. Basically, space-time is three dimensions of space and one dimension of time intertwined together. A simple yet perplexing concept. Think of it like a wool scarf that is woven using three sets of red yarn and a green yarn. It is hard to visualize the fourth dimension of time because we are so used to visualizing dimensions only in terms of space. Okay, let's try it this way. Imagine you are climbing up a spiral staircase. In doing so, you are moving forward, sideways, and upwards in the space at the same time. Additionally, the time is always passing as you climb up the stairs, so you are also moving forward in time. Essentially, we are moving through a 4D continuum of space-time that is made up of three spatial dimensions and one dimension of time. And we are essentially always moving in forward direction of time, and you can neither stop in time nor change direction as far as our understanding of the physics goes. So that begs the question, is it even possible to move in different direction of time? Theoretically, it might be possible. Think about moving in space. Naturally, we can only navigate through 3D space in a limited manner. For example, we can walk miles on the ground, but we can only jump a few feet up, and we can only swim underwater up to a certain depth until the crushing pressure of water is fatal to us. But we have pioneered tools and technologies such as stairs, ropes, cars, helicopters, submarines, spacecrafts, you name it, which help us better navigate through 3D spaces. Also, according to the theory of relativity, time can speed up and slow down due to effects of speed and gravity, which implies that traveling to the future is theoretically possible. If you travel at near light speed, then time will relatively slow down for you compared to the rest of the world. So, when a week passes by for you, hundreds of years might have passed for the rest of the world. Essentially, time travel to the future. Well, that is basically the premise of the original Planet of the Apes movie. So, we might eventually develop tools and technology to safely travel to the future. On the flip side, we haven't yet figured out if traveling back in time or in the reverse direction of time is possible or not. So, time traveling to the past is limited to sci-fi for now, which reminds me of the use of the term dimension in science fiction. Science fiction has taken liberties in the use of the word dimension as a fancy alternative term for parallel or alternative realities. For example, the term used in science fiction like alternate dimensions and pocket dimension don't mean actual dimensions, but whole other realities or alternate worlds. It is very easy to be confused when, talking about higher dimensions in scientific theories versus the higher dimensions in science fiction. But we will only be discussing the scientific concept of higher dimensions in this episode. So whenever I say higher dimensions, I don't mean alternate realities like Narnia or Wonderland, which does sound pretty fun, but maybe in some other episode. If four dimensions were overwhelming, wait until you find out there was string theory. String theory is a very ambitious theory that strives to understand the universe at the most fundamental level, and it suggests that at the foundation of the reality there aren't point-like particles as we used to believe. Instead, it is made up of tiny vibrating strings of energy. And just like how a guitar can produce different musical notes with different ways the strings are strummed, the different vibration of quantum strings of energy can create different fundamental particles that make up everything in the universe. For example, if the strings vibrate one way, it might look like an electron, and if it vibrates another way, it might look like a photon. So, the laws of physics are like sheet music that tells you how to produce proper musical notes, while our universe is the entire symphony. While M theory, which unifies different string theories, suggests that there are 11 dimensions in our physical reality. And that is not all. Space-time in bosonic string theory is staggering 26-dimensional. These additional dimensions are also spatial, but we haven't yet been able to observe them in experiments or in the physical world. So, why does string theory predict so many dimensions? Well, long story short, the universe includes everything, ranging from tiny fundamental particles like atoms and subatomic particles to astronomically massive objects like stars and black holes. The main goal of the string theory is to combine the theory of relativity, which is the physics of macroscopic or astronomical objects, and the quantum mechanics, which is the physics of subatomic entities, into a single unified theory that could explain everything in the universe. Which is also why it is most commonly known as the theory of everything. Right now, these two systems are like two prideful geniuses. Think Sheldon Cooper from Big Bang Theory and Dr. Gregory House from House MD. They are masters of their own fields, but the moment we try to force them into collaboration, they would endlessly argue with each other. If they worked together, they could probably cure cancer, but instead they probably would create super cancers to one up each other. Quantum mechanics and relativity are in similar places right now. The proper combination of these two frameworks could create a single mathematical equation that can explain any physical event in the universe. From the static shock you get from your sweatshirt to explosion of a star that showers the universe with gold, silver, and platinum. But the problem is that when working with only 4 dimensions, the math required to unify these two frameworks breaks and starts giving infinity as the solution, which in physics usually means that we are missing something. In other words, the strings don't have enough room to vibrate in only 4 dimensions. So having at least 10 dimensions keeps enough room for the strings to vibrate in a way that produces the proper music, which is our physical reality. That is why string theory predicts that there are at least 10 dimensions in our universe. But keep in mind that as of right now, string theory is not experimentally proven yet. But it still remains the most promising theory out there. So, is it even possible to visualize higher dimensions? The answer is not in the conventional sense, but it's not impossible either. We can make it easier to understand it using some analogies. Let's look at a simple analogy to better understand this. Say an engineer has designed a new mechanical tool, and if she uses only textual description to present her design, then it's going to be extremely difficult to convey the actual design and mechanism of the tool to other people. Think of her trying to explain how a doohickey attached to another doohickey makes the another doohickey move in a way that the first doohickey slides under the second doohickey. That is extremely confusing. But if she was also allowed to include a diagram of the tool, then the design would be much easier to conceive compared to just, explaining it in words. Now, later add multiple diagrams of the tool showing different angles and levels. This will make the design even more easier to understand. Let's take it one more step forward and later create a digital 3D model of the tool. With the digital 3D model, we can look at the tool from different angles. We can also check the exploded view to study individual parts and watch an animation to better understand its working mechanism. So, adding more levels of access can help describe and visualize a model more accurately. I've actually got one more analogy for you that might help you understand higher dimensions even better. Take a Pringles can and shine a flashlight to cast a shadow on the wall by holding it end first against the wall. Then you will see a circular shadow. If you do the same with a tennis ball, then you will see another circular shadow as well. Just looking at the shadow, you won't be able to tell apart if it's a Pringles can or a tennis ball because both are circular shadows. But here's where it gets interesting. If you turn the Pringles can over its side, then the shadow will transform into a rectangular shape. If you do the same to the tennis ball, the shadow remains circular. So, looking at two different shadows of each items, you would be able to tell that one is cylindrical and another is spherical in shape. By just adding one more dimensions of the shadow, you have upgraded the information to identify the shape of the object. But here's the catch. If you just look at the shadows, you won't still be able to tell if the cylindrical shape is a Pringles can or a tennis ball can or something else that's cylindrical in shape. And same goes for the spherical shape. You won't be able to tell if the spherical shape is a baseball or a tennis ball or something else that is spherical in shape. But directly looking at the object will give you all the information about its shape, size, and color, so you will be able to tell exactly what it is. In a similar way, what we experience as our 4D reality could be a projection or shadow of much more complex, higher dimension. Also consider this flatland analogy. This is actually my favorite one. Imagine there are 2D cartoon characters living on a sheet of paper. The 2D creatures cannot perceive or understand anything beyond 2D. So, if you poke a hole through the sheet of paper with your finger, then they won't actually see your finger. They would instead see a flat circular shape out of nowhere. Then they will see the circular shape getting bigger and then smaller and smaller. Then they will see the circular shape just disappear. So, similarly, we could also be seeing only the 3D slice of the 10D reality. We may not be able to visualize dimensions beyond 3 dimensions, but we can still imagine higher dimensions by translating it to 3D visualization and adding some analogical concepts. For example, a square is a 2-dimensional shape that is made up of 4 one-dimensional lines. A cube is a 3-dimensional shape made up of 6 2-dimensional faces. Basically, a 2D shape is made by stacking one-dimensional shapes and a 3D shape is made by stacking 2-dimensional shapes. Similarly, a tesseract or a hypercube is a 4D cube that has 8 hyperfaces made up of 3D cubes. So think of it this way. If you look at one of the edges of a square, you see a one-dimensional line. If you look at one of the faces of a three-dimensional cube, you see a square which is a 2D shape. Similarly, if you look at one of the faces of a hypercube, you will see a three-dimensional cube. I'm pretty sure this did not just magically make you able to visualize the four dimensions. It could still be a little challenging to wrap your heads around it because, it is something like a person who was born blind trying to imagine what a rainbow looks like. The 2014 sci-fi movie Interstellar portrayed the concept of higher dimensions being presented as a 3D structure in a very interesting way. By the way, if you haven't seen the movie, slight spoiler alert. In the movie, the 3D structure was created by supposed future humans as a translation of their five-dimensional reality, basically enabling the present humans to interact with higher dimensions. I think it was a very good visual representation of a higher dimension. It also does a very good job of portraying a wormhole as a spherical hole in space rather than just a flat circular hole. A wormhole, also known as portal, is a theoretical concept of folding 2 points in space together to create a shortcut that cuts travel time between these 2 points. Basically, it is a hole in space-time through which you can pass through to get to another part of the universe. Think of it like digging a tunnel straight through the center of the earth, connecting Argentina and China. If you travel the conventional way, it would take you around 30 hours in a commercial flight from China to Argentina. But if you jump through the tunnel, you will cut the travel time by only about 40 minutes. A wormhole is often portrayed as a circular, two-dimensional hole or a tunnel in science fiction and even in some scientific papers, most probably to make it easier for us to understand the concept of folding space. But in actuality, it would be a spherical three-dimensional hole or even a hyperspherical four-dimensional hole, similar to how it was depicted in the Interstellar movie. Likewise, a gravity well is often portrayed as a pit or depression in fabric caused by a massive object. But in actuality, gravity wells are being created in four-dimensional space-time due to the gravity of massive celestial objects like planets, stars, or black holes, which is nearly impossible to visualize. Instead of it being like a very heavy guy in a trampoline causing it to stretch down, it is more like a deflating balloon. Not just bending in one direction, but bending towards the center from all directions. I highly recommend you to check the show notes of this episode if you are interested in seeing graphics of this concept. It might help you understand it better. Why can't we see higher dimensions? And where are the other dimensions? There are several theories as to why these dimensions remain invisible to us. There's the theory of compactification. This is the most popular explanation in string theory. It suggests that extra dimensions are curled up or compacted into such incredibly small scales, probably trillions of times smaller than an atom, that we cannot simply detect them. For scale, if an atom is the size of the Earth, then these extra dimensions would be smaller than a single human hair. Also, imagine a garden hose. From an airplane, it looks like a one-dimensional line. Only when you are inches away, you will see it has a circular thickness or a second dimension as well. So basically, this theory suggests that they are too small to see. There's also the brain world hypothesis. Brain as in membrane, not like in brain inside the skull. This theory suggests that our entire 3D universe is a membrane floating inside higher dimensional space called the bulk. And particles like photons and the matter that make up our bodies are basically stuck to this 3D membrane. And since light cannot leave this 3D membrane and travel into the extra dimensions, we cannot see them. And my personal favorite, the theory of biological evolution and neural structure of the brain. Most biologists agree that evolution usually favors the traits that are useful and beneficial to the survival of species. Evolution also usually weeds out traits that are energy expensive, even if those traits are somewhat useful, because if the net energy output is negative, then the species will starve before the trait helps them find food or mate. That is why it is believed that we only have sensory ability to perceive up to only 3 dimensions. Because while we need sight and depth perception to hunt and avoid predators, there does not seem to be any significant age for having a 4 dimension or 5 dimensional perception. And that is probably why we don't have any sensory organ to perceive beyond 3D, nor did we develop a neural architecture required to process and understand higher dimensions. Hypothetically, if we grew up in an alien or otherworldly environment, we might be able to develop the mental capacity to see or comprehend more dimensions. And there's also the theory of weakness of gravity. Some physicists believe gravity is only force that can diffuse from our 3 dimensional membrane and enter higher dimensions. This would actually explain why gravity is so much weaker than other 3 fundamental forces, because it is basically being diluted across dimensions that we cannot see. Also, the fact that gravity not only affects the 3 dimension of space but also the 4 dimension of time gives some credibility to this theory. It is important to note that the concept of higher dimension is mostly theoretical, and currently there is no direct experimental evidence for their existence. But this does not mean that higher dimensions don't exist. It just means that we haven't yet been able to detect them experimentally or see observable effects in our physical world. Major theories like superstring theory, M theory, and Kaluza-Klein theory are still considered incomplete, even if they offer very robust mathematical solution to combine the quantum mechanics and general relativity, mostly because we simply don't yet have the technology to experimentally verify them. Nevertheless, they have been very influential in the field of physics and mathematics. Actually, calling them influential is probably a huge understatement. These theories have been paradigm shifting. They have generated so much discussion, debate, and new research in physics and mathematics, which is pushing us closer and closer to the theory of everything. If you are feeling wildly confused, that's the normal reaction to have going through these things. If it makes you feel any better, even Einstein struggled to understand and accept some of the implications of his own theory. For example, Einstein thought gravitational waves could not possibly exist even if his own theory of relativity pointed towards it. And nearly 70 years after his death, gravitational waves were experimentally detected and proven by LIGO observatories in 2015. He also did not believe in the existence of black holes that was also suggested by his own theory. Even when scientists like Karl Schwarzschild solved Einstein's equation which proved their existence, because Einstein thought the idea of black holes was physically impossible, which has also been proven to exist through several different observations. And he famously rejected quantum mechanics for its probabilistic or random nature by saying, God does not play dice with the universe. And that is all for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. So I will see you guys in the next one. Until then, sayonara, fellow Earthicans.